Hey, J-Cake here, and I want to thank you for sharing part of your day with me. In my world, it is Bowtie Tuesday. However, in Major League Baseball, it is trade deadline day. There were a ton of deals made over the last week, but there were a flurry made right at the deadline. I'm not going to talk about all of them. However, after I talk about my teams, I am going to hit on just a few. I think we all know which ones we're going to talk about, Verlander, Scherzer, etc. But again, I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm going to hit on a few that I think impact me and impact playoff chances and or World Series opportunities that might come up for these teams. We're going to change it up this week. We're going to start with my ESPN leagues. This year, Russell My Jim Jams has been the most disappointing team I have had. This past week, I was playing the number one team in the league. So what do you think happened? Yes, I lost. 10 categories to 2 categories to 4 categories. There were very few highlights from my team, so we're not going to talk about that. But I do want to talk about the players that I picked up and dropped. I added CJ Abrams, Steven Matz, and Taylor Ward. In order to make room for those guys, I had to drop Seiya Suzuki, Miles Mikolas, Austin Hayes, and Jason Adam. I am sitting in 8th place with a record of 92 wins, 122 losses, and 42 ties. And with a quick shift, we're going to move over to my South Harmon Institute of Technology team. This week, I won big, 10 categories to 2 categories to 3 categories. This brought my overall record to 130 wins, 108 losses, and 50 ties. I'm also only now 11 games behind the division leader. Some of the guys that helped me to this big win included Francisco Lindor and Matt Olson both having at least 2 home runs. Those 2 guys and Justin Turner and Yan Gomes hitting at least 300. Kenta Maeda and Merrill Kelly at least 11 strikeouts each, and Carlos Estevez picking up 2 wins for me. From one high to another, we're going to shift to my Fantrax League and the Funky Junky Joker Monkeys. They were able to pull out a win this week, making 3 wins in a row, bringing my record up to 7-9. I won this week 414 to 257. The biggest contributors included Ronald Acuna having me 40 plus points and Freddie Peralta having a 32-point game with 13 strikeouts. There were no adds and drops this week, nor were there any movement in the standings on my part. I thought I was going to move up to 7th because myself and a 7th place guy have a 7-9 record. I'm going against a guy in 6th place this week. If I can win and add a 4th game to my winning streak, I can cut the games needed to 2. Unfortunately, we have to talk about lows now. My Cheese Weasels dropped from 111 points to 108 points. I'm still sitting in 5th place. However, the points distributed amongst the teams were shifted because some guy named Shohei Ohtani pitched a complete game shutout. Instead of talking about individual players that did well, I would like to talk about individual players that have good news and bad news pertaining to them. The good news, Yordan Alvarez came back last week and is getting off to a good start. Esteury Ruiz is also supposed to be back this week, and that's going to be great because my stolen base lead has shrunk. Brandon Woodruff is also going to be completing his 2nd rehab game today, actually, and hopefully we'll be back with the club by next week. Now some bad news. Jonathan India is hurt. He's on the IL. He is my man crush for fantasy baseball. Not only does that impact my Cheese Weasels, that impacts multiple other teams that I have him on. Another negative is JD Martinez. He has to have MRI imaging on his hamstring, which 1 could lead him on the IL, but 2 is going to cut into my production. I'm going to have to find another second baseman, and the only person on my team that I can cut would be JD. I don't want to, because this has been phenomenal for me, especially in the home runs and the RBIs categories. But we got to do what we got to do. Transitioning to my Kent Murphy Dingers, I did lose this week 4 categories to 6 categories. There's no way I should have lost the pitching category, especially in wins. I had phenomenal stats when it came to ERA and WHIP and Ks, but the wins did not add up. Looking at the Alex Cobb game, he couldn't get a win against the A's. Looking at Kenta Maeda and Logan Allen, who could not get wins against the Royals, and Christopher Sanchez, who pitched 5 no-hit innings, had the bullpen blow up on him against the Pirates, that absolutely should have counted as 4 more wins for me to make the categories tied 5-all. Some of the other stats playing into this loss, including the fact nobody wanted to steal a base for me this week. I had 1 stolen bases to his 9. Also, my batting average was 213 to his 270 plus. Some of the bright spots on the team included Matt Olson hitting 3 home runs and having 8 RBIs. Also, Adolis Garcia and Nate Lowe each had 4 RBIs. As I mentioned before, my ERA, WHIP, and strikeouts were great. I had a 2.75 ERA, a 1.08 WHIP, and 69 strikeouts. Nice. Also nice were the additions I had to my team, which were pretty pitcher heavy, including Christopher Sanchez, Kenta Maeda, and Alex Cobb for starters, and Kevin Ginkel and Brooks Raley for closing duties. The drops included Scott McGough, who completely forgot how to pitch after the All-Star break, Shane Bieber, which is very unfortunate, Taj Bradley, who was optioned after really performing poorly after the All-Star break, Logan Allen, and Alex Cobb. Well, that does it for my fantasy teams. There were some highlights and some lowlights. Hopefully the rest of this year will be all highlights. Now we're going to move to the trades that I wanted to talk about. We're not talking about all of them, but we're going to talk about some of the bigger ones and the ones that impact the Yankees. The only trade the Yankees made were for struggling relievers, so I don't really want to talk about that. The ones I do want to talk about include the pitching that the other teams got in our division. The Orioles traded for Jack Flaherty. You may not think that's a big deal, but Tyler Wells was just optioned to Double-A earlier this week. I told you last week he had reached his innings limit, so that's something you should take mind of for some of your other young pitchers. With that said, Tyler Wells had 111 strikeouts and 7 wins. Jack Flaherty comes in with 106 strikeouts and 7 wins. Flaherty's ERA is 1 run higher, and his ERA is significantly higher. However, the Orioles are also scoring at least 1.5 runs more per game than the Cardinals. So, that 1 extra run from the ERA is still negated by the half run extra the Orioles are putting up. I think it's going to be a good trade, and I think that he is now going to look good in the orange instead of the red. The Rays also made a move, getting rid of one of their top prospects, Kyle Manzardo, but they grabbed Aaron Civale from the Guardians, or the Platinum Level Health Insurance team from Cleveland. Again, may not seem like a big deal. He's not a big strikeout guy. However, he can get the wins. He doesn't get the ball out over the plate and let up the home runs. And with the pitching that you have seen stem from the Rays bringing guys in, I think Civale's going to be great. Now, the Blue Jays had their top closer go down, Jordan Romano, so they brought in another closer from the Cardinals, Jordan Hicks. I think that's a good move because he's a flamethrower. He may not always know where the ball's going, but he is going to pick up the saves. There are going to be good setup guys that can also pick up saves, Swanson, Garcia, to name 2, but they're better setup guys. Hicks will be the closer until Romano comes back, and then there will be another piece for the Blue Jays to deploy in the late innings. Bo Bichette also had an injury scare, so they brought in Paul DeJong from the Cardinals. I think that's a good move. He probably will not play once Bichette comes back, but he is a utility guy. You can put him anywhere on the field. He's going to be a veteran presence, so that is a temporary placement until Bichette gets back. And now the teams that have no impact on the Yankees at all, because I don't see the Yankees making the playoffs. It's pessimistic. That could be me being a fair weather fan, even though I'm not, but I just don't see it. The Texas Rangers were able to acquire Max Scherzer. However, they did have to give up their number 3 prospect, Luis Angel Acuna, who is the younger brother of Ronald Acuna. Now, looking ahead, that could be a really cool matchup rivalry with the Acuna brothers on the Mets and the Braves, but the biggest thing about that is that makes the Rangers very, very scary. He's able to bolster that rotation, and they can finally send Bradford down, who wasn't giving them a whole lot, to be honest with you. The Mets were also able to get the number 1 prospect out of the Astros farm system, Drew Gilbert, for the likes of Justin Verlander. Now, Justin Verlander was with the Astros before, 1 Cy Youngs, 1 World Series, with an asterisk, but the point is he's able to bolster their rotation after losing Luis Garcia earlier in the season. Now we're going to move to the West Coast, where the Dodgers added pitching that was vital, including Lance Lynn, who, yes, he has a 6+ ERA, but the man can get strikes. He might also throw live batting practice, but he gets strikes. and going to a much better team with better run support and better relief pitching. If Lance can even get to the 5th inning with the lead, the Dodgers bullpen will be able to keep it. And the team that made the biggest splash, of course, the Angels. They picked up some key pitching and some key batting to alleviate the pressure from Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. C.J. Cron had originally been in the Angels organization, but more famously, Randal Grichuk was chosen by the Angels in front of Mike Trout in that draft. So, fun little way of everything coming full circle. They also picked up Lucas Giolito and some other relief, including Ronaldo Lopez. I think that's really good for them. Do I think it's going to be enough to get them over the hump and to the World Series? No, I don't. I really don't think so. Even if you have Grichuk, Renfroe, and Trout in the outfield doing their thing, I still don't think that's enough. You're going to have Ohtani doing his thing on the mound. I don't think that's enough. I heard earlier, the breakdown. If they make it to a wild card, it's 3 games. Shohei gets to pitch 1. He gets to hit 3, but the other pitching for the Angels has been very lackluster. Reed Detmers has, he has a lot of strikeouts, but he also lets up some runs. He had a good little streak where his ERA and his whip are pretty low, but he's also nearing his innings pitched last season. Tyler Anderson, huge disappointment. Patrick Sandoval, nowhere near he was last year. I don't know if they have enough. Now, it would be nice to see Mike Trout get to the playoffs and do something more than what he did in the World Baseball Classic, but hopefully he won't have to worry about all that pressure moving forward because he will have some other pieces to help him. And also, luckily, he won't be facing Shohei on the mound. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to talking to you again next week and seeing how these trades are beginning to unfold for their teams. I hope that you are also chugging forward towards your playoffs in your fantasy leagues. And I, again, look forward to hearing how you're doing. This is J-Cake, and I want to thank you for sharing part of your day with me.